Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Quest for the Bestest. It's the podcast from Backlot Banter, where we review every single Palme d'Or winner. We covered every single Best Picture nominee for the year 2024. We talked about Oppenheimer. We talked about Barbie. We talked about all the other ones. And we had a little bit to say
this
about...
one covered every winner for 2024.
Yeah.
All one.
All one of them. Oppenheimer, which won the film, which won, Best Picture. And, in the years past, we might have reviewed every single Best Picture winner card in the corner. Go check all that
not
stuff
to
out.
not to brag, but I was accidentally just buffing my fingernails out of habit. Oopsies.
But we're all done with that, and we are into the tasty world of French awards. The
Yes.
Palme d'Or from the Cannes
Technically,
Film
yes.
Festival today. I am so delighted to be talking about one of maybe the most known about, talked about, reviled, loved, many, whatever. Revered, all kinds of words to describe Martin Scorsese's 1976 Palme d'Or winner, Taxi Driver, written by Paul Schrader, of course starring Robert De Niro, Jodie Foster, Sybil Shepherd. This is a film that has gone on to inspire many other films, some notable ones of the recent years. I myself had actually never seen it before viewing earlier today, so I'm coming at this with some fresh thoughts.
Sure.
Anyone else seen it before? You guys all seen it before?
Yeah, I'd seen.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, Timo, we did our homework as film fans that have
That's
now
true.
graduated college.
True cinephiles. We had
Hey.
seen and digested Taxi Driver for years.
Now, I
Better?
usually don't like to pick on people for not watching movies, but I feel okay doing it when it's Timo.
Yeah.
That actually makes me happy.
Hey, it's because I haven't seen a lot, but we get to them eventually.
true.
We're going to discuss this film in great detail after I remind you of the film we discussed previous on the show, because I didn't remember what it was. I don't expect you to remember what it was.
It's been like 2 months.
It's been a little while. It was, after some research, Antoine et Antoinette, a French drama film about World War II. We thought it was, kind of all right. I don't exactly remember what we'd said in the review, so you, dear viewer, should go watch the review and check out exactly what we said to
And then
find
comment
out.
here and tell us what we thought.
Yes, to do our homework for us. The film, however, got a score of 6.1, which put it at the 7th spot? Or no, the 9th spot on our list.
You tell
One
me,
of the
you
two.
tell me, buddy. Yeah, I'm not looking at the spreadsheet.
I think it's the
Put it on the
Spreadsheet
list.
mastermind over here.
spreadsheet.
It's on
Put
the
it-
list.
It's on
On
the
the
7th
list.
spot because I have to do
With a
this.
score, it's on the list.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
there it is.
That's right. Many are. Many are.
So, Taxi Driver. Let's talk about it. First, though, Abram has a featured comment. We can't forget to
And of course, we have to shout out
ingratiate
our.
our dear
We
viewers.
have to shout out the community.
We do.
We have to do our part.
Yes.
This is a comment here from our beloved friend and fifth member of Quest for the Bestest, John Tour 11, who does two things.
Okay.
First, he agrees with me by saying on our video about how Oppenheimer might change the Oscars forever.
Sure.
Says Abram is obviously right, as usual.
Abram is obviously right. What a great way to start.
We
Obviously
gotta
right.
switch up. We gotta switch around who reads the comments. I've noticed he keeps doing that. I'm like,
It's
we're
very
giving
interesting.
him his soapbox every time.
No,
This is
I
right.
certainly cannot be selection bias. Certainly not.
He goes on to say Amadeus goes above Oppenheimer, winky face. But the real reason I wanted to read this is because it's tax season.
Oh.
And we...
Don't remind me.
Taxi driver.
Not only taxi driver, but because it's tax season, I wanted to read this comment because we are being audited.
Are we?
John
Oh,
Tour
shit.
says the following.
Oh,
Audit
no.
time. It seems that all the King's men and wings, and I firmly believe that Sunrise belongs there too, are missing from the eminent bestest and quested
Oh.
list on Letterboxd.
Sure,
Yeah,
I
it's
see.
because I'm the only one who updates the letterbox like every 3 weeks or something. Sorry, my bad.
Are they on there now, or does that still need to be rectified?
I don't think I added them.
Okay, well,
Well,
we'll-
This Quest tax season has come and gone.
That's
We've
true.
We've
Yep.
fucked up our return and we're getting audited.
we're getting locked up. We're getting locked up. You know what?
No
Here,
extension
John
for
Tour,
us.
we're paying.
Lock
We're
me up
paying.
then.
We're doing some back pay. We're doing some back taxes. By the time that you watch this video, they will be on there. That's a
It'll be
BLB
fixed.
promise.
Those
A
are
real
not
one.
good for anything.
But we keep them.
We keep them. Okay. Tanner, would you
Yeah.
do us the honor of describing this here Martin Scorsese film, Taxi Driver? Mayhaps a little synopsis, mayhaps just a little vibe
sure.
depiction.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief since this is again one of the most known films of all time. So,
And everyone knew what Antoine and Antoinette was about,
Exactly.
so that's why we didn't.
Taxi Driver is a little film about a man named Travis Bickle who gets employed as, wouldn't you believe it, a taxi driver in 1975 New York City. It's dirty, it's dingy, it's seedy, and he has quite the attitude about that, I would say. He sort of hates the seediness of it. He often refers to the grime, the dirty people that inhabit the city.
The slurs. He says a lot of slurs.
Yeah, there's some slurs thrown in there as well. And through some failed attempts at love, he becomes radicalized and decides to take action into his own hands, attempting an assassination on a politician, perhaps a presidential candidate, and does end up taking out his aggressions on, I guess like a prostitution ring somewhere in New York City. For which he is heralded a hero in the papers, and then that's kind of the end of the movie. He rides off into the
good
sunset.
Guy, Travis Bickle.
Exactly. He is sort of the idyllic anti-hero for a lot of people, and I'm sure we'll be getting into his characterization. So yeah, that's basically the plot of Taxi Driver.
Yeah. Okay.
This movie is very simple, which
Yeah,
I think is what works to its strength, because this movie feels cyclical. It feels repetitive. It feels like you're inching forward bit by bit, but I feel like that is what ingratiates you so much into the mind of a character. I think that Taxi Driver is one of the best films at portraying a basically only one character, because the other side characters I'd say are rather edgewise in terms of screen time and development. But I think it really works for that. I remember watching this movie a few years ago and thinking it was good, but not thinking too much about it. But now going back to it and knowing who Sybil Shepherd is and knowing who Albert Brooks is, and having watched a movie that this inspired, and being a little more in tune with color grading and shot composition and soundtrack, I think this movie is very, very good. I was especially just drawn into the first act, which I know is not the craziest part of this movie, but I think it might be my favorite because I think that's where its vibes are its strongest. You just get a lot of cruising around New York streets with neon lights and synth score in the background, like some jazz and lights flowing by a reflective windshield. And I'm like, this is vibes, man. This is New York City. And then shit hits the fan. But I think this is a very good movie. Very, very good movie.
Tucker, I agree. I especially was drawn into the vibes of Taxi Driver, of which I had sort of forgotten about since it's also been years since I had seen it for the first time. There's just something ingratiating and almost hypnotic about the way that Scorsese sort of displays 70s New York here. Because there's obviously the seediness and the grime of it that is clearly displayed with all the, the crime that we see happen in the film Taxi Driver. But there's something so I don't know if charming is the right word, but it's the one I'm going to use. That
a certain kind of charm.
It's a certain,
I wouldn't want to have that kind of charm.
Exactly. It's a certain kind of charm that
Bickle
is.
Riz.
It's a certain kind of charm that is necessary necessary for this story, I would say. For Travis Bickle as the POV character here, we are experiencing New York as he sees it. Which is character. It's big POS character too. Which is dirty, grimy, crime riddled, but also like there's something alluring to it that you can't exactly tear yourself away from.
Yeah.
I mean, I really thought this first time around I was paying attention a lot to Travis's character and who he is and why he's thinking the way that he is and how he sees the world. And like you said, Tanner, this film is very clearly a point of view work. Like we're seeing it and everything is being influenced by what he thinks. And we don't really get like an objective outside view. And I think that it's really successful in making the audience think in the same way that he's thinking, in the same twisted and same like very irrational and, unhealthy thought patterns that leads him to go on the killing rampage at the end. And I like the the kind of like the biting commentary here at the end of his being heralded a hero, and we see how troubled and how unhappy he feels and how he's like, your health is like how you feel. And I was quite struck by the film. I mean, we've come to see films that are more gratuitously violent and more like that have outdone, but that's kind of alongside the trend in general of films and the industry. That's not really.
John Wick 4 win the Palme d'Or?
No, it was
so.
something else, I think. But anyway, we digress.
So lots to like about this film. The score was, I thought, a particularly high note for me. So yeah, all in all, Marty Scorsese, he knows how to make them, and he did way back in the day too.
Yeah.
I mean, I love Taxi Driver. I think what interests me the most about Taxi Driver, because at a certain point we're just sharing reverence for a film that has been endlessly discussed.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Not endlessly discussed by us. This is our
true.
first time talking about it.
But it's it's on AFI lists. It's on BFI, whatever you want. Yeah.
There's
CFI, DFI.
There's really not much new you can say about Taxi Driver, but I think the reason why Taxi Driver does feel new to think about all the same is because I think that it is so prescient. And I was remarking to Tanner about how I think it's very interesting how films like this and Fight Club have aged in like hyper masculine, toxic American culture. I think that a lot of the behaviors of Travis Bickle are sort of archetypal for a lot of the incel thinking and behaviors that we hear about in the news and from a lot of far-right influencers and things. So it's very interesting to watch Taxi Driver now and be captivated by this sort of, I think, constantly reinvented character of Travis Bickle, both throughout film, but also through our real world. I think that Taxi Driver is both hyper stylized. I love how when we're outside on the street, we're usually bathed in red. So I think it works really well stylistically, but I think it also has this very interesting ideological point that is very grounded and creates this film that is both hyper real and like hyper imaginative. So I think it's just excellent.
The ways that it's like this film is so prescient today, and how these very strong issues that are facing our society of like lonely young men who are very violent and have very strong ill will towards women and minorities. Wait a sec. What?
I took my hand down before you said the last part.
There's a delay in the video call.
But like, okay, so this was an idea that it comes out of the post-Vietnam War era. Of
course.
And that's what's really like steeped in this film. And there's this clear combat kind of, there's this memory of violence that Travis Bickle's going through, as well as he doesn't really fit in with the world. And that leads him to a very, very lonely state. And he remarks on this a couple of times in the film, but like, I'm taken by how like this sense is a sense that I hear repeated and I hear talked about in almost the exact same words, in almost the exact same context today about people online and about trends and, groups of people. And it's not exactly a shining recommendation on our society to have not changed so much, but it does really say that Scorsese knew what he was doing, and he hit the nail on the head with this character that is so emblematic of a gnarly American man.
What should be noted, of course, and I was gonna mention this because we're talking about how it reflects in the modern day, and I do find that Taxi Driver, maybe better than amongst the best of films that I've seen, has aged better as time has gone on. In doing some research, as I often do, I look for people talking about this film, but particularly the artist behind it talking about it. And hey, Martin Scorsese, God bless him, still alive, still able to talk about this movie in the modern era. Did one of these classic GQ videos where he, breaks down his most iconic movies. And of Taxi Driver, he said something very interesting that I think I had heard before, but just reaffirmed it for this conversation, that he said, now you look out there and every other person is like Travis Bickle.
That's 2 out of 4 members of Backlog Banter. And doing the math.
I think perhaps he's talking about
which one of us works out the most?
The distinct loneliness.
Which one of us doesn't have a girlfriend?
But what really is important here, and especially with a lot of the commentary and conversation that Scorsese in multiple videos that I saw was talking about this film, is that he really credits this film a lot to Paul Schrader, the writer of the film, who that it was his screenplay, his original idea. That was initially, a fun fact, supposed to go to Brian De Palma, but De Palma was not able to direct it.
So pick.
It went to Scorsese instead. And of course, Scorsese adds his own visual style and everything to it. He is intrinsic to why this film is iconic as it is today. But for the story and the character, we should talk about, the mind of Paul Schrader, really.
Sure.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
And frankly, the interesting thing about Paul Schrader writing this is obviously Paul Schrader, known as the guy who wrote Taxi Driver.
Of course.
But as it comes to the relevance to modern film and filmmaking, is a guy that is just notorious for saying crazy shit online
Yes.
and making scripts about characters that aren't very likable and usually don't turn out well. And I find him a very interesting figure, mostly just because of his personality. But I also feel like, in my opinion, this is the only movie of his that I can remember. Maybe there's some I'm forgetting that he's written. Oh, actually, okay, I love First Reformed. That's a great movie. But that this one feels much more timeless than some of the other ones that I feel like are they're in the moment. You think about the Card Counter that we watched a couple of years ago, and it's like that's really like one specific guy in one specific moment. I mean, Taxi Driver does have that timeless quality, but I also think one of the things that makes me appreciate it a lot more is I do think that it straddles the line nicely in that this movie feels very much of its time, in especially the filmmaking qualities that I want to get into.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that this is a much more like guerrilla filmmaking, like on the streets, using a lot of like mirror shots and things that feel very emblematic of 1970s new wave filmmaking. Of just being very grounded and very focused, and there's not the camera's never like super like doing big sweeps or anything. These are just like simple camera movements on real people in New York streets. And watching this movie, it to me felt very out of where I feel I associate with Scorsese, which is his modern work. And I don't just mean like the last few years, I mean the last 30 years, which are much more big sweeping camera movements and like people in like really nice outfits and high quality cinematography. And of course, this has that, but in the stylings of he's a super young guy making one of his first movies, and he's just on the streets trying to make something kind of interesting. He shows up in this. It is very much of its time. And I think that is a quality that makes this movie stand out from Scorsese's massive filmography. Is I don't know exactly which movies came out slightly after this, and I haven't seen all of his work, but this does feel very, very distinct from where I think of Martin Scorsese. I think of Goodfellas and The Departed and now Killers of the Flower Moon and The Aviator, and like these are like crisp movies. Taxi Driver is not a crisp movie, and I think that's a good thing.
It is quite analog, and I want to get to like I said, the filmmaking there, because I think in a way, and it's good that you pointed this out, that it feels very filmically it feels very of its moment of the 70s. I think both Scorsese and Schrader, sort of from a script writing and from a directorial level, made this a very conscious American reflection of like the European and especially the French New Wave sort of style of storytelling and also direction, which makes it very interesting as a Palme d'Or winner for the international body, who the body that would have incepted those sort of films, the French New Wave. I think making it so American and making it of its time is really what gives Taxi Driver its strength. Of course, Travis Bickle is a Vietnam War veteran, and that's maybe where we can draw a lot of his psychosis out of, is it maybe perhaps PTSD there, but we don't get a lot of background on that. He really just says that he was in the Marine Corps, he was honorably discharged. And so your mind can sort of run rampant with those details, or you can really just look at the events of the film and what unfolds here. I think De Niro's performance is also a big part of this, where he plays Travis Bickle perfectly. If you can believe it, Rob De Niro, great actor, gives a great performance in this film. With such an edginess and like always feeling as though he is a hair's touch away from inflicting violence on anyone that he's talking to.
Maybe, but I would say that for me, what I found so interesting about watching this movie this time with a little bit more knowledge of the filmmakers and the actors and everything, is that I do feel like it actually is more of a slippery slope for Travis Bickle. He
Yeah,
is
I
very
agree on
lonely.
that
He's
idea.
disconnected for that first act, but I don't think he's violent necessarily. And it's watching him become more anxious and be put into situations where he realizes that there's more active danger and that other people are dangerous, that pushes him to get guns and work out and be more have a little bit more of a an anxious mindset. But at the beginning of the movie, he's like, no, I don't need a gun. Like, it's fine. Like, I don't like those people, but they're over there. Like, I'll just let them ride in my car. It's whatever. He's just disconnected, but I don't think that he's a hair's breadth away until he is in the car with Martin Scorsese, and Martin Scorsese is like saying some crazy shit, and you see in his eyes like, oh, this could go very badly for me, and then combined with Sybil Shepherd rejecting him, and then that kind of like, again, as you said earlier, radicalizing him, that's what puts him into the state of the Travis Bickle that we know.
Yes,
that when we think about Travis Bickle,
like,
we don't think
from the
of
very beginning.
Yeah, we don't think of him as the lonely, just kind of like laissez-faire taxi driver guy. We think of him as mohawk, gun strapped to his chest, that guy, which is definitely, I mean, he's on the hair. There's no breath. Like, he wants to hurt someone.
Well, I think the strength of the performance for me is that I think you always know that he can be radicalized, because I don't think that there's ever a point in the film where he's well adjusted. One thing I don't
know if there's ever a time in his life.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about the opening scene, because the film doesn't start in a very glamorous way. We start as Travis is essentially like kind of doing his application, kind of just being interviewed, kind of simply being handed the taxi driving job.
Yeah.
And we're simply going through his very basic, where's your chauffeur's license? So you were in the military, whatever. And he's got a little bit of like this anxious nature to him, where he's trying to joke with the guy who's hiring him, but it's not going well.
Yeah.
He seemingly has no real obligation or purpose in his life, because he just wants to work whenever, whenever. He reinforces
long
that.
hours. I want to work. He's putting himself
at night too.
Through a very grueling and very tough regime that would be hard on a normal person.
Yeah,
dealing with insomnia.
We see, we hear him say that, even after a 12-hour shift, I can't sleep. He talks about cleaning the blood and the cum off of his backseat with the same way that he talks about, I melted a piece of cheese on my pie when I had my date with Betsy.
That's fucked up.
That's maybe the biggest note that he is, he's not all there.
So that's why I think that even by the end of the film, because obviously one of the most iconic and eerie shots, he's got his hand to his temple after he's been shot, and he's lying in the bloodbath, and he's just doing this and like smiling at the cop. I think that I think that Robert De Niro brings this same uneasy tenor across the entirety of the film that makes his radicalization, even though it happens quite quickly, feel quite natural.
Yeah.
And one thing I want to point out is I think that this is an impeccably edited film.
Yes.
You were mentioning the idea of
the editor, if you saw the credits, Marcia Lucas, George's wife.
The woman who apparently saved Star Wars from being a massive mess.
So she did this and then did Star Wars, the timeline. Because Star Wars is 77, this is the year prior. Maybe she did something in between, but that we don't know about. But
she's just awesome.
Yeah, she is.
I mean, I think of this sequence as Travis is driving, I think in the first act of the film, and we are cutting between lights turning green and the fare ticking up. And to go back to the idea of this hypnosis, I think you end up being lulled into this world of Travis's mind state. So then when you get the brilliant reveal, if you know it's coming, but the shocking reveal if you don't, the pan across the political rally to Travis's body up to his shaved head. It's exquisitely put together. I think that the film also reinforces this uneasy, hypnotic feeling, and then the editing breaks that at key moments to illustrate how far Travis has fallen.
It is at the same time anxious and also hypnotic. It's kind of how I would describe the mood, aesthetic, and especially the editing is a big part of that. of just how this film comes across to a viewer.
I mean, for me, a large part of that is just kind of the texture of this movie, the amount of rain that we have, this very grainy film stock that we're using. I would call it to me, it's a very stereotypical 70s color palette and a very 70s color treatment of the film. But it's very beautiful for that. And we get lots of very deep colors that are beautiful. There's a lot of beautiful imagery in this movie, despite it's like, you're like, oh, that out of focus bokeh of that amazing neon sign, and then it like goes into focus and it's like a porn theater. And it's like, there's a very intense tension, I think, between a sort of a love for this city, a reverence for New York, and a very big pain, I think, that is being displayed through Bickle's character about the actual very state of the city. And I mean, maybe we have used this very metaphor before and maybe it's tired, but like New York as a metaphor for the entire country, and the feeling of everything going to hell is exemplified by the city of New York going to hell in the 70s. What a way to externalize a character's internal grief and general messiness than to make his whole world that he lives in reflect that and be gross.
You can actually connect that to something that Abram was saying earlier, is the color grading of this film is actually very, very red. And so if New York is going to hell, and all the lights of the people outside
red,
are very
and
red.
There's a bunch of like yellows and oranges too. These very warm,
like taxi kind of colors.
Yes.
But I love the color grading here, and it actually reminded me of another movie we reviewed on this show, which is In the Heat of the Night, which I think probably inspired this movie in some ways, in terms of nighttime photography and neon lights being kind of the vibe that you take away from it. I love the color grading in The Heat of the Night. Another great movie, one of the great movies that we reviewed on here. But watching especially those opening sequences and just watching driving around these dark streets with neon lights being the things that are illuminating and lots of color, I drew the connection. I think that's one of my favorite elements of this movie, to the point, and this isn't like a criticism, but to the point of when it's just daytime photography and he's like just driving his taxi and they're like, oh, no, go back to nighttime, which of course doesn't make any sense, but because all the other interaction with other characters comes usually during daytime segments. But I personally really prefer the look of the nighttime sequences because that is such a striking image and uses lighting and color grading in such specific ways.
Yeah. They don't make nighttime look like they did in the past. You know, they don't make nighttime photography like that no more.
Damn LED bulbs, bring back the fluorescence.
I mean, on the color grading note, the poster that I have sort of custom on Letterboxd here is like a watercolor sort of. Here, you can take a look at that. It's sort of like a watercolor collage of moments throughout the film, which really I feel really has a lot of that color grading in there. It's reds, but also a lot of blues and yellows in there as well. On the point of how the city feels, I want to circle back to something that I had said earlier, and I think it sort of can also leapfrog onto things that we've been saying about how we, as modern viewers, feel and view Travis Bickle as a character who is radicalized. I have mentioned, I think in my opening sort of statement there that you feel sort of disgusted by this New York, but also drawn to it. It is alluring. And Travis feels the very same way, and I think that is important to his characterization, that he purposefully, at his own admission, hates the scum, hates the villainy, hates the crime that is going on these streets at night, but purposefully takes those nighttime hours, purposefully says he'll drive anywhere, pick anyone up in his taxi, and I think for that reason is, in a way, either consciously or unconsciously, torturing himself with these things that he hates, confronting himself with it to get himself angrier, which is, of course,
what we see. It's the equivalent of me reading a Twitter thread that full of people that I don't like saying things.
On a slightly more serious note, people, alt-right people, radical conservatives, people down conspiracy theory holes, confronting themselves, actively seeking out, or perhaps being served up by social media algorithms, things that will anger and antagonize them to only further their beliefs and their angers.
This is like prehistoric rage bait.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, effectively, though, the psychology of it remains the same, whether it's 1975 or 2024.
Yeah.
I think what's so interesting about the perspective of this movie is that it is so POV through the eyes of Travis Bickle in terms of the pacing and the choices made. But also, and I think maybe it's because I don't want to associate myself with Travis Bickle, and as I want to associate myself with him as few ways as possible.
Mhm.
I feel like I'm watching this film from like an extra bubble where like I'm always thinking about the fact that this is weird and that what he's doing is wrong, and that like I don't find myself completely immersed in this film because in my mind, Taxi Driver and Travis Bickle is such a microcosm and example of people doing bad things for bad reasons and being motivated by bad things and having a personality that drives them to do such. So I like kind of watch it from a distanced view. And I think that's interesting because Travis is so disconnected from social structures in this film. We hardly see him form bonds. The only bonds that he does form are very, very fleeting. And for the first like half of the film, he doesn't have any bonds. There's not like really, side characters that he's talking to. And even when we do see side characters, it's usually them talking to other people. And either he's not in the scene or he's there and he's not saying anything. And so I find this like a very distanced movie, even in its own structure, because he's so far in his own head. And from what we know about him, even though we're not given a full backstory, I think we're able to fill in the cracks of, I don't know if he's ever had a friend. I don't know. I don't know what he was doing before this, but I'm sure it was either nothing or something not good. And watching him actually kind of like grow to be more social over the course of this movie, because I would bet that him going up to Sybil Shepherd's one of the first times he's ever approached a woman, him like making a somewhat friendship to try to do something somewhat selfless to save
Iris.
To save Iris. Yeah, sorry, I couldn't remember her name.
It's all good.
That's probably the first time he's ever done something selfless like that. Like watching a really cold and distant guy become more social, but for the wrong reasons and in the wrong way, is a very unique way to portray a character like this that I think makes this film feel even more distanced.
He's becoming antisocial.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the term for like the type of behavior, like literally the type of behavior that he engages in is called like antisocial.
So what would you call like
behavior.
not interacting with people? Is that not also antisocial?
Asocial, I think, is how, if we're going to be really pedantic about it.
Yeah, I haven't heard that one, but sure.
Yeah, it's just like he's so. I mean, I'm actually very interested to discuss Travis's relationship with women in this film because I think that's really what we are trying to get at with his reflection on modern male culture and the ways that Travis. He objectifies women, and he is very well. His interactions with what's her name, with Betsy, being played by Sybil Shepherd, right at the beginning of the film, and the rejection and the ways in which he deals with that are, I think, they're very interesting to me because I read them as a natural reaction of his character. What I know of him, and when he starts going down this path, it's like I can tell what's going to happen. And I think that I don't think this is a criticism at all of the film, but that De Niro's performance and it's like he's got this trifecta of he's so attracted to these women, but he's kind of afraid of them, and he hates them also for what they do or don't do to him, that he ends up in this really nasty emotional cocktail that makes him, harass Betsy over the phone for a while and then get involved with the child prostitute Iris and kill in her name, pretty much go on a murder spree for her in her name. These are two ways in which he's trying to interact with women that end up in a very, very disastrous state for him, despite him thinking that this is what will get him laid, which is what a couple male friends advised to him is what is all he needs.
Yeah, I mean, I've been listening to a big documentary about Sneeko recently, and I'm not really going to get very far into that. But what I do want to say, and the parallel I want to draw, is the way that I think, because I think of Travis Bickle through two different lenses. I think of him both through the retrospective lens of Travis Bickle as an incel. Yep. But I also think Travis Bickle as a displaced cowboy.
Yeah, of course. That's a big thing, yeah.
and that's a different whole point I want to get into. And I think that the idea of him as the guns and the boots.
I mean, Harvey Keitel's character is like, "Hey, how you doing, cowboy?" Like, it's very clearly called out what is being invoked there.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can take the second half of Taxi Driver kind of in the way you might take, like a Fistful of Dollars or a samurai film.
Scorsese has specifically cited The Searchers, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, in the way that he is.
Yeah,
and we can talk about the because there's a lot of entitlement in Travis Bickle's character. In the latter half of the film, I think there's this imposition and this idea of like him as a cowboy arriving to a town that he must liberate, or he must save the damsel of the town from the big bad man. And we'll get into that because I think that's very interesting. But to your point particularly, Timo, about him as like an incel character, I think part of why this movie is perennially relevant is you listen to a lot of these people like Sneeko talk about the fact that you just got to go out and you got to get women. And if you fuck and if you're in good shape, you can do push-ups, get rid of your depression, and you meet a woman and you're a cool guy. I think that Travis Bickle, on a fundamental level, while this is obviously more than the text of the film informed by his time as a veteran, unable to reintegrate into society, you also think about him as just like a victim of what we now refer to as like the male loneliness epidemic. I think the ways that he feels entitled to Betsy's affection and her attention, and the anger he feels when he can't receive that anymore, is very in step with a lot of the more dangerous alt-right lines of thinking that are still very problematic and prevalent today. So I think totally. Go ahead, Timo.
Diving into this his whole deal with Betsy is to think about the other campaign worker that is his like rival, and I think the film paints a very
Albert Brooks.
I mean,
the enemy of masculinity, Albert Brooks.
I mean, it's like Sigma v Beta right here. Like you've got it's very prototypical in the way that incels talk about this nowadays, right?
Yeah.
And that the way that the film chooses to show this other male character, this competitor, as being kind of feminine and as being kind of not really ever working. Look, he's ever just kind of hanging around. And that also clearly upsets Bickle quite a lot. I mean, he says so during their little date. And so there's definitely some sort of like inter-male conflict going on between these two that Bickle doesn't even know where he fits in the male hierarchy of the world, I think.
I would absolutely agree. And I think, a big thing of Taxi Driver is him seeking out to kill the men that he sees as controlling the women that he needs to save. That would be not exactly Albert Brooks's character, but more sort of he's zooming out even further to kill Charles Palantine, who is the woman who Betsy is working on the campaign team of, and then of course Sport, right? Sport Harvey Keitel.
Yeah. He's the pimp.
Like he is seeking out to free these women from their male captors, if you will, seeking his own form of vigilante justice on them. One he fails and one he succeeds in, obviously. And I think what's very interesting, what Schrader and Scorsese put in here, is the fact that effectively Travis sees no difference between killing a politician, a man running for president, and killing a pimp. But because he succeeds in one and not the other, he is heralded as a hero. And it sort of brings into this thing of like doing the right thing for the wrong reasons,
Or Travis's goals / morals versus society's goals / morals,
of course,
are kind of fundamentally misaligned.
I think Travis is also interesting if we're thinking about his plot to kill Palantine, in that he is a political grifter.
Yes,
he is the most literal political grifter that's ever been put on screen. He doesn't know what Palantine stands for.
Yeah,
because Betsy will ask him like, "Hey, what do you think of Palantine's
stance on welfare or whatever?"
And be like, "I don't know, but I bet it's a pretty good stance.
I bet it's a good one."
And you know, he even says to Palantine when Palantine is in his cab, you know, I don't know what you stand for. I'm not a very political man. I don't follow the issues, but you're a good candidate and you're going to win, sir.
But no, wait, what's important is that he says, Palantine sort of presses him on it, and he's like, no, what? So what do you, as an average, you know, American voter, a guy just on the streets of New York, what are you looking for? And he's like, these fucking streets are dirty. You need to flush it down the toilet. President just takes care of all this stuff. And Palantine, it cuts back to him, and he's like, all right, well, it's going to take a lot of work.
Yeah, and I mean, it again, if you want to draw some sort of modern parallel, I think a lot of the like pro-Trump dogma of people who really don't know what the fuck Trump even believes, but thinks that he's like a paradigm of something they agree in, and then they use that political momentum for whatever they want to purposely serve, is again an interesting filmic and modern parallel between Travis and a lot of these right-wing bad actors we see all over the place. So I think that him wanting to then kill Palantine, not because he has any sort of ideological difference in Palantine, of course, but because Palantine is the sort of, to use incel lingo, Chad figure.
He views himself as being cucked by Palantine to a certain extent.
I think it's very interesting. I think there's a lot going on with his relationship, not necessarily to Betsy, but to what Betsy represents for him and what the people around Betsy represent as obstacles between him and her.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because it's thematically complicated, but narratively and character-wise, I think it's very simple, which is why I said when I started this off, like, this is basically a one-track movie. I mean, it's through his mindset, which changes over the course of the film, but once he's got his mind set on something, he's set on it. And I think that the most iconic parts of this film come from the focused solo sequences of him shooting guns and training and making little rickshaw contraptions to make him more efficient and like hyping himself up to be a more efficient and vicious person to deliver the kind of justice that he has been wanting since the beginning but hadn't focused on until his mind was clear of the distractions of women, I guess. I mean, I think you can probably read that a little bit into the progression of his character. And I think that's also in the moments where De Niro's performance is given the most time to shine, because otherwise, as I mentioned, in the interactions with other characters, for the most part, he's pretty quiet. He's pretty understated. He's in the background. But when he's by himself, that's actually where he's at his most boisterous and at his most his loudest, and it's where he talks the most. He's constantly talking to himself and narrating the letters that he's writing, repeating things that he's saying, and those, I think, writing wise and also filmmaking wise, are very interesting. Deliberate choice, I think, plays back into what I was saying earlier of this feeling very much of an experimental grounded 70s. I know experimental and grounded might be a little bit at odds, but if you think more French New Wave, Breathless style of grounded and also experimental, I think there are touches of that here in the sequences where he like flubs a line and he tries it again and the film restarts and we get the same shot again. And I'm like, that you're pulling from something here. And those are not, that's not the entire film. This is not Breathless. But I think that the fact that there are touches of that and that comes with his mindset and comes with him by himself. And again, as I said, delivers some of the most iconic parts of the film, shows how laser focused this movie is on his mindset being a one-track mindset, because again, once he's changed his mind on something, it doesn't really go anywhere else. He's set on that. This is the section of the film where he's focused on that, and he's going to get to whatever end that ends up being, and then he's going to move on to something else. I think it's a very interesting structural or narrative choice.
Yeah. I was just looking through here. Should we talk about the big, his attack on the sort of like prostitution ring? Should we talk about that at the very end?
Yeah, let's do it.
So one thing that, obviously is prevalent across much of Scorsese's work is, the underground crime and the killing that comes along with it. And I think his sort of display of murder in his films has really changed over the 50 years of his filmography. We, of course, just talked about the murders that we see in Killers of the Flower Moon, for example, are quite matter of fact. There's not a lot of bombast to them, which is quite different than if you're looking at things like The Departed or Goodfellas or something like that. And I think here, there is something that feels very real about it. Like, I don't know, it feels much more brutal than in a lot of other films of the era, or even modern films that we might be looking at. Because I think Scorsese wanted to drill home, like, he's not killing a lot of people, but he is, like, sort of brutally doing it, and people live through gunshots and continue to try to attack him. It's not like a one tap and this guy's done situation. So
it's much more Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Like Texas Chainsaw Massacre on a marquee at one of the theaters that he's driving past at the beginning of the film.
So I mean,
I'd say there's probably a chance that is that
touchstone,
one of the inspirations.
I don't know, because I think it was 74. This was shot in 75. It might have just been that that film was showing at the theater that they were.
Hold on, no. I'm just curious. If it was came out in 74 and this was shot in 75, that is the perfect time period for this to be, for that action sequence to be inspired by the brutality and matter-of-factness of Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, the thing on the marquee is more of a coincidence, and not like Scorsese being like, hey, can you put this on the marquee back there?
I'm thinking about how the setting, the actual blocking and the staging of this scene creates really interesting, like, action tension. You've got the stairs that people are coming down, as well as it's just so very cramped, and that the location is pre-established, that we already know where everything is laid out in this place and who to expect there. And so this is all set up in the film. And the part that really gets me is the final kill, when he puts the gun right up to the guy's head and he blows the dude's brains out, and there's just a big giant blood splatter on the wall. And those practical effects are very, very well done, because that is like, it's brutal.
The hand one is the most convincing to me. I'm like, what the hell?
When a guy's hand gets blown off by a fucking 44 Magnum, Jesus.
Which, to talk about the cowboy, is this, like, comically large and impractical gun that he, like, has to hold in his armpit.
Very Clint Eastwood. And if you notice, Clint Eastwood's name in the background of a couple of shots. I don't know if it's a marquee or whatever. But
because he had it's another thing like Texas Chainsaw. He had a film out around the time. So
Dirty Harry was a couple years before.
Was Dirty Harry?
Which was, I was just checking. It was 71, and obviously the Magnum is Dirty Harry's gun.
His weapon of choice.
So this is where my cowboy thing comes in a little bit, because I view the final action sequence as actually a sequence of fantasy for Travis Bickle.
Okay.
Because
it was all a dream.
No, I mean fantasy in the
fantasy fulfillment.
Yes.
Okay.
Because for a lot of the film, ostensibly we're in Travis's head as he's writing his manifesto, and then we literally see him write a sort of manifesto and practice it to himself, and practice it in bed and everything. And he builds up these kills. He doesn't really know what the kill is supposed to be, right? Because when he's making that arm contraption for the pistol, that's before he's going to go assassinate Palantine. He just has this desire to do something really bad, as he says to the other taxi driver, or as he tries to...
bad thoughts in my head.
Can't get out or whatever. But he builds this up as something that he must do, and this is a crime of fantasy in some way.
Yeah.
And I think the excessive violence of that is in some way a revelry, and again, it supports the subjective perspective of the film, in that this is Travis being showered in the blood of the realization or the actualization of the manifesto he's been writing this whole time. He's using the Dirty Harry gun.
Right.
And I mean, I watched Dirty Harry with my dad, and he was like, when we were kids, everybody wanted the fucking Dirty Harry gun.
Right.
Like, that is a
the
very
hand cannon. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very deliberate choice for it to be that gun, and that is and that film coming out several years before absolutely was an influence on this. So then when you think of
just kind of, sorry to cut you short there, but I just realized that thinking about that cab conversation that Travis has with Palantine, and how what Travis really wants for this country is to clean the streets, to get rid of the crime, the scum, the people that he views as being, the worst of the worst. And
the implication is obviously he wants them dead.
Yeah, he wants them.
What would that mean otherwise?
No, yes.
How do you clean up and get rid of the millions of people in New York City?
How did they clean up the millions of people of Vietnam? Well, I think that his inability to kill the politician is like a sign of like a central weakness to his character, that he is not strong enough to do the thing that he probably really wants to do. But the thing that he is strong enough to do is to take out someone in the same social, like, melees at the bottom level of society in which everyone is neither part of the legitimate world nor the illegitimate world, and they're all engaged in some sort of crime. I mean, Travis doesn't actually really, he's not shown like doing crime otherwise than the, killing of people, but I think that his ending is both a realization of his fantasy to clean the streets, of him seeing one opportunity to get rid of scum, and also it's got the added benefit that he thinks he'll be able to maybe get laid because of this.
Well, I think his deal is that I think his ideal for that situation is that he would die, like go down in a blaze of glory, essentially.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate hero fulfillment I think Travis Bickle has envisioned. Very, very cowboy again, to go down in the blaze of glory after having killed everybody else.
I mean, there's a very interesting scene, obviously, when Travis goes to like pick up some groceries, and there's a stick up in the convenience store at Melio's convenience store, and Travis overhears the confrontation, and instead of hanging back, he just kills the guy.
Yeah,
which didn't have to happen. The money could have been given over. It could have just been a stick up, and it could have been done. But he kills the guy, and then we hear Melio say, "5th one this year," or whatever. And then Travis leaves after killing this man with his unregistered, unlicensed firearm, as Melio is beating the fucking Jesus out of this guy.
This guy who's already dead.
I mean, it's very interesting to think about the general political situation of the New York being crafted in the first place, and the people around Travis, because I think they're just as telling too. But the cowboy thing, I mean, a popular reading of the Vietnam War in some ways is Vietnam as a sort of new frontier for an American cowboy. I mean, Apocalypse Now is a pretty clear filmic example.
We're talking about that in the series.
Yeah. He's got the cowboy hat on. Oh, what's his name?
Yeah.
The napalm guy.
Robert Duvall. Yeah.
Robert Duvall.
So if you think about Travis as a Vietnam veteran, off in this new frontier after obviously the West had been well closed by the fucking 1970s, right?
I don't know. Is that true?
But I think the idea that Scorsese is trying to deconstruct in some way through Travis's obvious construction as a cowboy with all the iconography of a cowboy in the boots, he even shines the boots before he goes to attempt his assassination, is
very lovingly.
Yeah.
He shines those boots with care.
And that's really important, I think, because it's this like reverence for this American cowboy figure that no longer has any place in society. He wants to go out and he wants to be gun-toting and he wants to kill some pimps and some other
rescue a damsel or two,
rescue the girl who's been held captive by the bandits. Yeah. But there's no framework in society at all for that anymore. The American cowboy has been gone. Yeah.
Do you think that the framework that the film presents as an alternative to the gun-toting vigilante individual is like the electoral political framework which is present? Is it the only other framework of problem solving in the movie?
I mean, I would disagree. I think it's what Travis becomes at the end. He's immortalized, well, not immortalized, but like sort of heralded in newspapers, and he's cut these things out and stuck them on his wall. Is that ultimately, I think what Scorsese is saying is that we often do still celebrate the vigilantes of this kind. As rare as these cases might be, when they do happen, especially if it's targeted towards the criminal underground, we will venerate these people, and that is obviously quite dangerous. So I think that is the connection that he is drawing, is that the cowboy is gone, and for a good reason. And that sort of mentality is quite dangerous when placed in a modern context.
Yeah, I think that the danger is a good point, because I don't feel like this movie is obviously ever supporting Travis Bickle's view. I think that the way that it I don't know, it is relatively matter of fact, and like, this is the main character and this is what's happening and these are the people on the streets. And I can't tell if it's just my mindset knowing that Martin Scorsese doesn't agree with this stuff, and that I don't want to, again, side as much.
Is it your modern eyes treat? I find myself asking the same question. Does the film really I don't know. I don't know if
I think it must though, because I don't think that I don't think that Martin Scorsese was like, "Hey, this is actually awesome."
Yeah. What?
But
sorry, continue, Tucker.
Because I think that you're right about the final point and maybe the maybe forgotten message of Taxi Driver, and I say forgotten based on the way that this movie is generally perceived.
Mm-hmm.
The forgotten message being it's not good to praise people for taking matters into their own hands, and that ending the film with him having articles written about him and having a letter from the dad about, oh my God, thank you for saving my daughter. Like, you'll be treated as a hero if you come to my home. That is a dangerous thing.
Maybe you should not invite Travis Bickle to your home with your still in school daughter.
He's like a vampire.
True.
He can't crush the threshold.
I think the important thing for understanding that is the final shot of the film. Of course, it's that, Betsy gets into his cab one last time, and then she gets out, and he's driving away. He's driving off, not into the sunset necessarily, but into some neon glow, into his sunset, and he adjusts his rear view mirror to sort of not reflect his eyes anymore, perhaps looking for Betsy in the rear view. And I think with that, Scorsese is saying that he isn't that the guy who gets it out of his system once. He is going to do this again, or do something similar to this again.
Taxi Driver 2 a couple years later,
exactly
straight to video sequel.
Oh my God, that final sequence
straight
with
to
Betsy,
porn theater sequel.
Those mirror shots with Betsy in the car at the end of the movie are my favorite. They are beautiful. Just this incredibly, the way that they get the focus so soft on the mirror so that there's no clear boundary. You don't see the border to the mirror. It's just as equally blurry as everything else is, but the eyes that are looking at each other, they're just spot on in focus. I love it. It's so good. It's so beautiful, and it's so vibey and evocative of the car and of the entire movie, and just these very knowing and yet unsettling glances that our characters throw at each other.
I mean, it's also emblematic of just how good of a director Martin Scorsese is, being able to block these shot sequences that take place entirely inside the cab of a taxi. Another one that I feel is very good at that is when he first encounters Iris, and she clambers into the back seat, and then the camera goes back to the side view of the thing where she's being pulled out, and then we pan over up to the driver's seat to see Travis, and then Sport sort of throws him a 20. We never see his face because Travis never sees his face for the first time. That whole sequence right there is done very well. Quickly though, on the note of sort of how does Scorsese or Schrader feel about Travis Bickle as a character, what I've discovered in doing some of the interview commentary research is that obviously they do not condone. But I think what Scorsese especially said a lot is that they tried to approach it with some empathy for him, for being at the core of his being an intensely lonely man who is radicalized to do awful things.
Well, I think that's why Travis Bickle is a compelling character, because he is in some way a victim unto himself.
Yeah.
He's a victim of a lack of support when he returns from war. He's a victim of being essentially completely unmoored from any kind of community that can support him. So I think that that's an interesting complication. I mean, I think this entire film has interesting complications because I think that Iris...
Maybe a walking contradiction of sorts?
Holy shit.
I think Iris is very interesting because also she is a child who's facing horrific abuse that has become normalized to her. And so there's this interesting element to where Travis is, if you want to look at it like a non-legal moral hierarchy, he is doing a good thing.
That's what I wanted to say, is that I think I had mentioned it earlier, he's doing a good thing for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, I mean, this is why it's interesting, because the film's message is not that it should have been left to the police. We reinforce this idea that the police don't do anything.
Yeah.
That is an idea that's reinforced through Travis's dialogue, reinforces the police showing up by the time the shootout is well done.
That's like a Scorsese through line.
Yeah.
That's in a lot of his movies.
The ineffectual lawman. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that it's another interesting and in some ways nihilistic reading of the movie, in that like the only way for this girl to not be like assaulted by a revolving door of random pedophilic men in New York is for Travis Bickle to come and kill them.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing to have to reckon with, and again, I think that's why it makes Travis Bickle such a perennial character, because again, a lot of the modern groundwork for a lot of the lonely men who do awful things is like a systemic issue that put them on that path in the first place. So I think that this film is very careful to illustrate that there was a good person in Travis Bickle, and there are larger social conditions that put him down this path in the first place. Yeah. It's not a flat depiction of a essentially incel domestic terrorist in some way.
Yeah. Well,
can I get a little meta? Oh, Tucker, you go ahead. And then I want to get meta.
On that one point about his relationship with Iris, I think is really interesting because she, as far as we know, because we never check back in with her after the shootout happened. Yeah. That's the last time that we see her. That's the last time we see any interaction with her. Up to that point, every interaction that the meaningful interaction that she'd had with Travis and him writing the note to her and sending her money and trying to convince her to find a way out of this to help herself, he was the best guy she'd ever met. He was actually talking to her, actually caring about her, bought her a grilled PB&J or whatever it was that she was eating. And it's really interesting to watch that sequence in which, if you had no external context to Travis Bickle as a character, and you put yourself through the eyes of Iris, a girl who has been convinced that the situation that she's in is maybe good for her, maybe like giving her some sense of agency, but obviously we know that externally it's not true because she's been conditioned into it, that this guy coming to her and actively not trying to have sex with her and telling her that she has potential, that she can go back to school, that she can try to make sure this doesn't happen to other people. He's a good guy in that scene. he's offering genuine advice, and he's helping out someone in need, and he's being genuinely selfless, and that feels so at odds with every other scene of Travis Bickle, and the entire other runtime of Taxi Driver. But that one scene does show that there's still a kernel of hope in quote unquote all of us. Like, even if Travis Bickle is the guy that would do a school shooting nowadays, even in him, he has a moral hierarchy where he can go to a little girl and give her like advice and actually try to improve her life. I think it's very, very interesting what you were saying, Abram, like giving him an extra dimension to his character.
I mean, the last thing I'll say, and this will give you a good segue into meta stuff, Timo, it's actually kind of the last thought I have on the movie, frankly, is that's why I think you can read, and I think you make a great point, Tucker, I think you can read Taxi Driver again as this sort of modern parallel for alt-right radicalization, but I think you can, again, if you read it through like a more cowboy paradigm, again, the idea of, if you're thinking about like Fistful of Dollars, Clint Eastwood's character is coming in to do what the law couldn't. And the idea that I think this movie is deprogramming ultimately on some level is, and to your point, Tucker, it's like, yeah, he's a good guy in this moment, but it shouldn't be Travis Bickle's job. It's like when people are like, well, and this is... most of my thoughts come from the Hasnabi broadcast to one degree or another. But when people are like, Hassan, you own a mansion and you care about homelessness, so why aren't you housing all the homeless people in your house? Because it's not his job. And I think that on some highest level, a clear takeaway from Taxi Driver, I think, is this general yearning for a better social fabric. Yeah. I think that that's ultimately what Taxi Driver is trying to express on every level. Social fabric. Social safety net. I think this is a very left-leaning film. Yeah. And I think that is ultimately what it's trying to do, to illustrate the law can't save Iris. Travis Bickle shouldn't be the one to save Iris. But there's a lot of people and institutions and structures and safety nets that should have saved her before.
Presidential candidates, maybe.
Presidential candidates. Maybe. And I think even criticizes that. So,
if like Palpatine or whatever, if he coming in with a gun and shot him.
Yeah, why didn't Palpatine do shit? Timo, are you taking the meta stuff where I think you're taking it?
I'm going to, but before I'm going to be a little meta. Apologies, dear viewer. It's raining quite hard and hailing a little bit outside. I have a thin roof, so if you can hear that,
we're not here. We're not.
The rain
hearing.
is washing the streets of Austin.
The rain.
Yeah, we can't hear it.
It's getting this. It's the pollen is getting washed away.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
What do you guys think about the fact that it is the filmmaker himself who incites our main character to violence?
Yes.
What is it? I've been thinking. My meta commentary is that in our year of the Lord, 2024, now that Martin Scorsese has made many more films, and specifically his latest one, Killers of the Flower Moon, that are very much supposed to implicate filmmakers in their own glorification of violence. What do you take that this is a very meta moment for us that know and care about it? I think a normal viewer, this just would blow past their mind, go right over their heads. But that, I mean, it's our director. He's not directing from off screen. He's directing in the movie right there to tell Travis Bickle to go kill, that it is a possibility. It is a thing that other people are thinking about doing.
I think it's interesting meta-wise. I don't think that there's that same kind of intention in choosing him to be that actor of implicating filmmakers.
Well,
because I don't think that's something that he came to terms with until much later in his career.
I agree.
And I think that Killers of Flower Moon is him finally like putting that forward as an artistic expression, because most of his movies for the 70s and 80s were just violent crime movies.
Yeah.
Like he was the guy showing violence. Like it wasn't the kind of what Killers of the Flower Moon did, like implication. But I think it's very interesting when you think of the arc that he takes, that this isn't his first movie, but it's certainly his first major film of that. This is where he started, of being the instigator, and then he closes out Killers of the Flower Moon. So maybe Killers of the Flower Moon should be his last movie. You know?
No, he's got to make more. He's making that one about it. He's making that one about ships or whatever. Team, I guess I don't have a lot of like thematic thoughts on it, other than I would say maybe it's just a case of Scorsese knew exactly what he wanted from that scene,
and was like, I can't get somebody to play it. I gotta do it. I gotta do it.
But I also have to say, I mentioned this to Abram last night. If I had a nickel for every Palme d'Or winning film in which a director casts himself in the movie and also that director says the N-word in the movie, I'd have 2 nickels.
Yes.
Pulp Fiction. Pulp Fiction.
Which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice.
Exactly.
He didn't write Taxi Driver, though.
That's a good point. That is a good point. That's a good point. But he did put himself in it.
He did put himself in it.
Okay.
I want to see the conversation between Scorsese and Schrader where they're like, look, you got to do it, Martin.
Yeah.
Just get it out
and
there.
Marty's like, no, I don't want to. I don't want to say that word.
There's some... Timo, where I thought you were going to take the meta thing is just pointing
you did 20
out...
Hail Marys after that?
Yeah, is just pointing out that this film did in some way incite real political violence, only, about a decade later with John Hinckley.
Against Reagan, you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, John Hinckley specifically cited Jodie Foster in this film that's his ideal. Like, he was trying to impress her, obviously, when he attempted to assassinate President Reagan in the mid-'80s. So, I mean, very interesting. A lot of the reactions of the time were like, between this is a masterpiece, giving it the Palme d'Or, and also this is a very dangerous film, we shouldn't be celebrating this.
Yeah, and I mean, that's why if you can believe it, I think that Martin Scorsese is a pretty smart guy.
Really?
And I think that as much as
Abram, I would agree.
As much as I don't like the card counter, I also think that Paul Schrader is a very smart guy.
I think he is. Yeah. In some ways.
I think you guys are selling short the fact that these people knew what they were doing when they had Martin Scorsese play that role.
Sure. Okay, I gotcha.
And regardless of what their intent was, there's no, I think, disputing the fact that as viewers taking this work to mean what we want it to mean, through a modern lens, that it's obviously very interesting. It's the director of the film, as Timo is saying, that did incite the violence.
Yeah.
And I think that it is not that different from what he does in Killers of the Flower Moon.
No.
Whether we want to worm our way into Martin Scorsese's head from 50 years ago and try to project what he was thinking or not, there's no doubt that if you're an audience member, the effect of those scenes
they have a similar effect for me.
Yeah. And I think it's also important to remember that it's not like everybody knew what Martin Scorsese looked like when they watched Killers of the Flower Moon.
This was so we're talking about like where it places in his filmography. As I mentioned, it was supposed to be Brian De Palma. Martin Scorsese got the job because the producers saw Mean Streets.
Yeah,
and that was his first film.
I just,
or not his first film. Sorry, his breakout. Oh, sorry, my mistake.
Yeah, I just think that it's very important that it is Scorsese that incites the violence, and I think that if you want to tie into an even larger metatextual bow, Taxi Driver is also one of the famous misunderstood or ill-reclaimed films in history alongside...
Did you mention Fight Club earlier?
I did mention Fight Club, alongside Fight Club, alongside American Psycho, alongside Wolf of Wall Street.
What do all these films have in common? This is very, very interesting to me.
It's like a really... and it's like they all... It's like all these movies have Travis Bickle in them.
Yeah, and so I think that's what's important, right? Regardless of if we want
Bickle Cinematic Universe?
The Bickle Cinematic Universe.
I inherently reject the idea that Scorsese was not smart enough or aware enough of his position as a filmmaker to not understand what him doing that role would mean. But even if we go under that logic, the fact that he is the one implicating himself, again, 50 years before Killers of the Flower Moon, in a film that has since gone on to be heralded in some way by bad people, liking Travis Bickle for the wrong reasons, is a very critical part of this film's commentary on the influence of media on people.
Yeah. We might be wrapping up. I'm not sure how much more everyone else has to say on it, but I just want to run down some quick notes I had.
Why don't we pull up our scores and we'll just get on our way wrapping this whole thing.
We didn't get to talk a whole lot about the side characters, but I think that makes sense. I mean, this movie is about and from the POV of Travis Bickle, but something that I really enjoyed about these characters that I thought about is they all feel like they're in their own movie as well. Like, if you told me there was like that Scorsese had made a movie about Iris and sport, I'd be like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. You know, from purely based on this movie, it's like that's a whole movie unto itself. Or the like political team behind the Palatine presidential campaign. I was like, that's a movie unto itself too.
That's kind of like All the President's Men.
Yeah, I was, like that's like, it feels like a movie, and these characters feel so natural that they have their own lives and their own stories.
The world,
that's maybe
our mise en scène is so different between these different side characters that they do actually feel a bit like separate films.
Well, and I actually think that's what I was kind of mentioning earlier when I said that if like to me it feels so different and quote unquote in a negative way when we're not at the nighttime sequences, because the conversations with Albert Brooks and Sybil Shepherd and Jodie Foster, who are the primary secondary
secondary characters.
Yep.
Yes. They're basically all during the daytime.
Yeah.
There are a handful of examples, but you're right. The mise en scène feels so different when we're with those other characters that it feels like when you're watching you're in the political office, you're like, this isn't Taxi Driver.
Yeah. I don't want to throw another thematic wrench into our basket of themes, but the day world versus the night world is something that I think could be even dove.
Yes.
I've even done some good academic research and then write a 1,500 word essay on that. In the comments, preferably by next Tuesday.
And Travis Bickle is the link between worlds.
couple more things. While never explicitly said, I like how Scorsese sort of subtly and only with looks and with the camera and looks that Travis gives black people in sort of implies that there is a racial tension to his character as well. It's never explicitly said, but yeah, it's very evident.
Intense close-up tracking shots of black people that are just they're just doing their life. They're doing their own business. Yeah.
We had shout out the score, this very cool jazzy score that serves the hypnotic ambiance of the film very well. Just wanted to shout out Bernard Herrmann, composer of a few little films such as Psycho, Vertigo, Citizen Kane, North by Northwest, couple films that maybe not a lot of people have heard of.
This guy
I've heard of all of them.
Citizen Kane, Psycho, and Taxi Driver.
Yes,
he did Citizen Psycho. That's what I thought they'd cut out. So I heard.
And quickly, do want to mention, shout out Peter Boyle, who plays the character Wizard here, who true cinephiles will know as Old Man Mickles from Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed.
Shut the hell up.
Okay, let's find out what we give this film. On our list, where is it ranking? Punch in your scores right now. In 3. I'm racing, Tanner. I'm racing him. In 3.
He's close. He's close.
Go for it.
Now!
Okay.
Boom, boom, boom. Oh, we're still waiting on Tanner. Okay.
There you go.
Our score is a solid 9.1, which does mean we're going to have to deliberate a little bit. Luckily, this should be a pretty easy deliberation for us because of relevancy of the mind. Point breakdown, though. First, the point breakdown.
Yes.
At the bottom, Tucker gave Taxi Driver an 8 point... No, at the bottom, I gave Taxi Driver an 8.5. Then Tucker gave it an 8.9, followed by Tanner's 9.3. And at the top, Abrams' 9.5. So that's a pretty nice squat range right there around the... right around the 9.1 mark.
We had zero disagreements. We had zero disagreements.
That's true.
That's
true.
No, we didn't. Maybe some minor ones, but nothing major. Okay, our tie that we have to deliberate here is Taxi Driver versus last year's Palme d'Or winner, Anatomy of a Fall. Both of these films, I'd say we have a good memory about. So, who wants to venture a first little inkling of which one should go on top of which one?
I mean, I'll just shoot from the hip. For me, I love them both, but I go Anatomy of a Fall.
Really? Okay.
Me too.
Anatomy of a Fall.
Okay. Timo, what do you think?
A pretty significant margin for me, personally.
Ooh. Taxi Driver. I'm gonna go because I put 8.4 for Anatomy of a Fall.
Let me see what my score was for Anatomy of a Fall.
I don't want to be the one disagreeing here, but I think the relevancy, right? You know, the relevancy of this film still. We're talking about how much it has kind of come forward and is maybe more relevant than ever, maybe not, or maybe as relevant as ever.
I'll put it to you this way. My one issue with Taxi Driver is that I think it ends too abruptly.
Okay.
I feel like I want a little bit more
I agree with that.
after...
2 minutes more.
Yeah,
just
literally
like a tiny bit more.
Yeah, I think we need just a little bit more. Obviously, I don't think that the point of Taxi Driver is muddled, but I think that either end in the adrenaline of the crack den prostitute flop house, or let us have just a little bit more to understand really what the implication of this is.
Yeah. What direction is he going?
So
and the consequences.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I think that you can infer a lot of it, but I think that it's just not as maybe deft as the rest of the film. By contrast, I think that Anatomy of a Fall, while I think they're actually both quite similar on like a social and political level, I think that Anatomy of a Fall maintains this incredible tension and engagement throughout.
They're both really good.
They're both really good. I've got a 0.2 difference between them. I consider them both
0.1 difference
exquisite.
between them.
Do we want to leave it for an audience tiebreaker on the first episode back?
Yeah.
I didn't vote. I'm still deciding, but I could make it a tie, or I could decide it here.
He could bump the responsibility down the line.
I think it's less interesting to change from Taxi Driver.
No way will Anatomy of the Fall win if we put it to the audience.
Well, let's find out.
No way in
You know
hell.
what? Fine.
Let's find out.
I'm gonna say Taxi Driver. It's 2-2. Audience,
2-2.
it's your time to decide. Leave in the comments. And which one you prefer. Which one should be above the other on our list? Anatomy of a Fall or Taxi Driver? Which one's better?
And keep in mind
that
this you're not fighting over 16th place here. You're fighting over second place on our list. The only film that's above this is Parasite with a 9.9. So I expect some well-reasoned arguments for this. Or
Second
you could just
out of
put
10.
Yes. Well, yeah, I know. I was exaggerating for the purposes of argument there. But number 2, that's what we're deciding here. Yeah, Taxi Driver or Anatomy of a Fall. I don't know. I mean, it'll be pretty good whichever way it goes. But
Yeah, sure. Of course.
let us know what you think, dear audience. And now, yes, Tanner, you have something?
Dear Tanner has something.
One last thing before we move off of Taxi Driver. I did want to give. I almost forgot, but it's something that we did before we did the Oscars break. Quick palm details here of the ceremony.
Right. Yes, we almost forgot.
I'll make this very quick. The jury president of this year was American playwright Tennessee Williams, who wrote Cat on a Hot Tin Roof.
As well as the Streetcar Named Desire play?
I believe so. That sounds right. That sounds right.
Those two are the same in my mind. Tin Can, Streetcar Roof.
Other notable jury members, I only had one, and that is Charlotte Rampling, who was a very famous actor of the time, but more modern audiences might know her as the Reverend Mother in the Dune films.
Oh shit!
No way.
Yeah, she was on the jury. She presumably voted this as one of the best films of the year.
Reverend Mother Helen Gaius Mohayim or whatever.
I believe that is the name. Yes. And not a lot of other notable films that I recognized in competition. Mostly just names, including Kings of the Road by Wim Wenders, and this one I have heard of, The Tenet by Roman Polanski, were in competition that year as well.
Tenet.
The Tenet by Christopher Nolan, 1976. All right, now let's get.
Now let's have a little fun here.
Tanner, do you have the list? I can't find it.
Oopsies. Hang on.
I have the list.
You're the one who made them.
I have the list
I
if we need it. Tanner, let me know.
I'm pulling it up.
When you're ready to sing, because I've got the spin here.
Just spin the wheel and I'll pick the movie that.
Oh, you're just gonna decide?
Yeah.
Abram will just
No,
decide.
I want to hear Abram sing.
Go for it, Timo. Oh, you want to sing?
Sing
You're
together.
singing
Yeah, let's do
now.
it.
Here we go.
Oh, we will what's your deal?
Make
Make a movie that gives us squeal. Digital is unreal. We will what's your deal?
39. 39 is the
You
wheels
tell
deal.
Tanner it's been a while since Tanner does it. He said, give
Yeah.
us squeal.
Give us
All right.
squeal.
Give us
The hell?
squeal. All right. Well, we are getting a real famous movie here. A real
none of these
Palme
unheard
d'Or
of movies.
classic.
You're lying.
I am
right?
lying
Yeah.
through my teeth on this one. We are, of course, getting a film from 1971. The only winner from that year, because sometimes they hand out two. This is a film directed by Joseph Losey, starring Julie Christie, Alan Bates, Edward Fox, and Michael Redgrave. From 1971, it is The Go-Between.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Ha-
Can we have a synopsis?
Went
Oh,
go
yeah.
between my
Anybody
ears,
heard
not
of
the
this
other.
movie?
I have
No,
not.
Mm-mm.
British teenager Leo Colston spends a summer in the countryside where he develops
Okay,
a crush
sure he
on the
does.
beautiful
British
young aristocrat
Teenager.
Marion. Eager to impress her, Leo becomes the go-between for Marion, delivering secret romantic letters to Ted Burgess, a handsome neighboring farmer. Maybe this could be like a Cyrano de Bergerac kind of film. I'm not really sure.
Kind of sounds
What's
like
the
it,
runtime
yeah.
on this?
Just under 2 hours. Just under 2 hours here.
Nice. It's about the same runtime as Taxi Driver.
Exactly. So
Okay.
there you go. This is going to be a nice little costume drama.
Next
assume.
week.
Oh wait, what time period is this?
I mean, the people in like fluffy collars and stuff
they look
like
kind
that.
of Victorian.
Yeah, roughly
I would
Victorian.
1890 if I had to
I don't
guess.
know, maybe people dressed like this in the 1970s in Britain. I don't know.
It's
We
Britain.
were
We
there,
may never
yeah.
really know. We'll just have to watch the film and find out. Stick around here on Backlot Banter for more movies discussion. The remainder of the Palme d'Or winners as we get through them all. Oh, I'm excited to be back. We've got many more to check out. But next week we'll be doing whatever this one is, The Go-Between. So I hope you join us for that in discovering some movie that, neither us nor anybody else has heard of. And maybe learning just a little incy-beansy bit about filmmaking in the process. Thank you guys as always for a discussion on an excellent movie, a very well-known, very time-honored film. I think we did it justice. And, well, until next time, stay cool, stay warm. Peace.
No.
We'll stay warm and stay
Stay-
cool and
keep-
stay warm.
Keep cool, stay warm.
Or
No, wait, what?